Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is hautemesstom and thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you are new here, you should know that my channel is very much focused on loving my collection as it currently is. I'm on a 6-month no-buy, so I'm currently not bringing anything new into my collection. So what I am doing is taking a deep dive into the collection that I do have, reviewing things that I've had for a while. Even if it's not on the market anymore, I'm just like talking about it. And today, no different. Today we're gonna be talking about Pat McGrath's Mothership II Sublime palette. Now I'm gonna have some close-ups on the screen in a moment here, but this is real quick what it looks like. So essentially I'm gonna make this video down into a few parts. I'm gonna do a shade by shade analysis, which is not gonna be like an in-depth analysis, just like what I think of each shade. I spent a lot of time with this palette over the past month or so, really getting to know it, getting my thoughts on it. So we're gonna start with shadow by shadow, then I'm gonna give my overall thoughts on it, and then, because this is not the first time I've filmed this video, at the tail end there will be a tutorial. Will it be a tutorial for this? No. I did not use this palette for this eyeshadow look because I didn't want to, but you know, that's a broader conversation. So weirdly enough, this is not the first time I've reviewed this eyeshadow palette on my channel. The last time I did it was when, around the time this initially launched, which I believe was in 2017. I'm gonna flash a screenshot of that thumbnail. I don't believe that this video is currently live on my channel. If it is, I'll link it, maybe not. I might just take it down because that might not be something I stand by, but it's a video that did very well for me at the time because it was a $125 eyeshadow palette. So I think what's important is to tell you my journey with this eyeshadow palette before this go around, because this is not the first time I've owned this eyeshadow palette. Also, my fan is on. It's a little bit roasty toasty here today. I need it. I'm sorry for the whirring if you can hear it, but like, I would just be a sweaty mess. I try really hard not to, you know, bring background sounds into my videos, but it's like, you know, I'm not perfect. So initially I bought this eyeshadow palette around launch. I don't know if I bought it right at launch, but I bought it around launch time. At the time I was unemployed, so what was I doing? Buying a $125 eyeshadow palette. I convinced myself that I loved it, but I did in fact return it and get my money back. And that was the smart decision to make at the time for me. However, in 2019, I repurchased this palette. I had funds. I was not unemployed. There was like no, I didn't think I was about to be unemployed. I was doing all right. It came back into my life. I bought it. And now let's go shade by shade. Also, if this is your first video of mine that you're watching, I have Motherships 1 through 8. I'm slowly working my way through each one and reviewing them and ranking them as such. So if you would like to see the first one, go up here in this playlist, see what you like, you know, figure it out. That playlist, it's over there. Sorry, this playlist. Because things do not. I will be reiterating some thoughts that I had mentioned when I did my Mothership 1 review. So if you've already watched that video, you might be hearing some repeat things from me because, you know, we are reviewing a brand. Assuming that the formulas are similar, there's gonna be some overlap, okay? So let's break it down shade by shade. We're gonna start at the top left of the palette, work our way right, and then do the second row. So the first shade is Skin Show Glow, and this shade, now I mentioned this in my last review of the Mothership 1. The shades in the top left in a lot of the palettes are just a highlight. So inner corner, brow bone, even cheek highlight, it would work for that. These are typically not my favorite shades in the palettes. I normally just kind of consider them duds and a lost cause for me. Those are like really not my jam. Like I don't really care for those. I would rather have another matte in their place. I really like, because if I'm not gonna reach for these to put on my face, and typically my order of operations for when I apply my makeup is I do my eyeshadow first. So while I am looking at it and I could use it as a face highlight, very rarely is that the face highlight that I'm gonna use. Like I'm doing a project pan, so like I'm often going to like think to use my project pan highlighter first because it's a universal shade, so it doesn't really lean warm or cool. It just works almost for any look. Unfortunately, like I just like don't get a lot of use out of these shades. I think they would be they're not bad formula. They just aren't they're not my particular journey when it comes to the Pat McGrath shadows. So next up is Copper Toned, and of the shimmer shades that are not the pigments on the far right of the palette, It is probably my favorite of those shimmer shades in this particular palette. However, it doesn't really like stand up. And what I mean is, whenever in my Mothership 1, what I really liked about those shades is that there was not a lot of opacity. So they were just kind of this beautiful hint of shimmer, but there was a lot of intrigue in those shades. And I don't feel that the Mothership 2 shades, or this copper tone shade, has the same amount of intrigue as like those silvers and that lilac that are in the first one. This feels like pretty standard fare when it comes to eyeshadow. The formula is fine. It feels very similar to the formulas that are in Mothership 1 as far as what those eyeshadows feel like. But because this shade is kind of basic, and I think a lot of the shades, the 6 shades on the left-hand side of the palette, they're pretty basic. It's like it's not like a shade that I think to use. Whereas the lilac in the Mothership 1 is a shade that I think about often as something that I want to put on my eyes. So that's not really drawing me to this palette, which is, you know, unfortunate, you know, considering the price point. The next shade is the shade Iconic, and Iconic is, you know, similar. It doesn't have a lot of opacity. It is a pretty shade. So my favorite thing to do with this shade and Copper Tone, my favorite thing to do with those shades is kind of use them to blend out rough edges, because they're so light. They really do, they lift the heaviness of the 2 mattes in this eyeshadow palette, because sometimes like you really only have really 2 very deep colors in mattes in this palette. So you definitely need to, if you're only using this palette as a piece, like this is the palette that you have decided to use, the only palette that you are using today, you really have to, I think personally, like finesse in a negative way. Now, I don't mind finessing an eyeshadow palette if I think the payoff is worth it, but I just think that the lack of options in the mattes in this particular palette leave a lot to be desired. But I know we're not talking about that yet, but Iconic is a very pretty shade. It's almost like a, I don't know, a bronzed taupe is a good way to say it. So it would look very pretty all over the eyes, but it's just, again, not a shade that like comes to the forefront of my mind when I'm thinking that I want to do an eyeshadow look. What do I want to do my eyeshadow look with today? It's like I'm not particularly thinking about this shade. And while I do think it's very pretty, and I think there are a lot of people who are very into this type of shade, especially as like an all over the lid look, it's definitely not for me. Let's start talking about the special shades in this eyeshadow palette. So the first one we are encountering in this format is Bronze 005. Now, while I think this is a very beautiful shade, it's not something that I lean into a lot. I have actually been really liking bronzes. I mean, it's like kind of on my eyes today, but there's something about like, it's like not something that I'm always thinking about. I think they're very beautiful, and it looks very beautiful in the eyes. It like is a very high impact shade. It like really goes there, like the end, like Degrassi. It's a really beautiful shade. It's just whenever I'm not like it's like not what I'm reaching for. And what's funny, and I guess which we'll talk about more of my overall thoughts, is like in this palette, it's like I'm reaching for some specific shades in this palette. It's like not this. Next up is VR Nectar, and VR Nectar is a beautiful, sorry, I'm like, as I'm talking, I'm referencing. So it has like this champagne pinky green. There's like also like a little bit of a shift of green. It is just such a stunning little shade. So there's also the VR shade in the last palette in the Mothership 1 was also one of my favorite shades. So this is like definitely a shade where like I open this palette, I'm like, yes, that's the shade I want to use. That shade's so beautiful. It's so special. It's wonderful. It's amazing. I love that shade. So for me, this really does it for me. This really tickles my funny bone. This is like the kind of shade that whenever I'm opening up a Pat McGrath palette, like that's the kind of shade that I'm looking for. Things with dimension, things with texture, and it just has all of those things. Next up is Extreme Black, which is a repeat shade. So unfortunately, it does kind of like feel a little bit moot to have it in this palette, but I also think maybe at the time, and I'm gonna give Pat McGrath the benefit of the doubt here, is that when you're designing these palettes and they're $125, you're kind of expecting the person to pick their favorite color story, and that's going to be the one that they stick to. Now, there is a bundle where you can buy all 3 of the Motherships, the original Motherships as a set. So that was an option for sure at the time, but I honestly think that like the thought process was that everyone would buy the one that they like the most. And I can't remember, I haven't really dug into Mothership 3 quite yet as much. I'm currently in progress you know, using that palette to review. The Extreme Black, it's like a fine black eyeshadow. It's not my favorite black eyeshadow that I have. So it's just, it's there, it works, it does the job. I don't really have a lot of issues with it, but it's just like, it's certainly a black shade, and it's also, because I own both the Motherships, I now have it twice. Next up is the second of two mattes, the shade Dark. It is a very dark brown. It's a very dark brown. It's very dark. So just keep that in mind. So I would say if you are not looking for like something very deep and sultry, then this palette might not be for you. As well, if you are someone who explicitly needs a matte in your look, which, you know, a lot of people might not. They just might want the shimmers, they might want the other things, but it's a very dense brown. I like the way this brown performs. I think it works very well. It blends out very well. You can definitely play with the depth of tone, you know, the lighter of the application. It's going to adapt based on your pressure, the amount of pigment you have on the brush. So you can definitely layer it and do all kinds of things with it where you can really add some dimension just with the one shadow. But that's not my preferred way to use eyeshadow. That's like a very pro way, I feel, to use eyeshadow. And it's just like not how I use my eyeshadow. So like Dark is, while it's beautiful and pretty, it's like, there's a lot to be desired in the mattes for me in this palette specifically, so I'm just going to move along. Next up is the shade Rose Dusk. Again, like the Copper Toned and the Iconic, same formula, similar formula. I don't think there's really anything special about the shade. It's just kind of like a rosy, rose mauve-y shade. It's just like, it's like kind of unextraordinary. It's a very ordinary shade to me. It just doesn't feel very special. Doesn't really add much to the palette for me. So it kind of is what it is, but it performs well. Next up, I would say, is probably the reason most people, if they've bought this eyeshadow palette, is why they bought this eyeshadow palette. And that is the shade Blitz Emerald. Blitz Emerald is this beautiful, I'm gonna say it's a duochrome. So it goes from almost a forest green teal shade into a deep purple. Now, what I think is fascinating about this shade, this was kind of, well, I'm sure there were brands that had beautiful multi-chromes before this. I think this was like the first hint that multi-chromes would potentially be something that people were very interested in. It's this beautiful pigment. It has this shift to it. Weirdly enough, now that I've tried some other brands of multi-chrome shadows, this particular multi-chrome leaves more to be desired. While VR Nectar, I think, really does it for me, this shade actually leaves something to be desired. So I have a lot of, if not all of, I have no idea if I have all of them, but I have a lot of the Stained Glass collection from Clionadh Cosmetics, and I would say that all of those multi-chromes perform in a better fashion than this one, because this one, it's not very creamy. It's kind of dry. What is difficult about this is that it mostly shows up green, right? So there is that shift, and I only ever see it at very specific angles in the pan. I find that on a swatch or on the lid, it just is green. So it's like there's a promise of a shift that you never quite get. So there is like a beautiful texture to it. So it does like definitely add things to the eyes, but it's just not the most exciting multi-chrome that I've ever used. Finally is the shade Astral Ghost Orchid. So much like the Astral White pigment in the first palette, Astral Ghost Orchid is more of like the pink version of that style of pigment. So like I said in my first video, these shades do not really have a pigmented base. It is more of like something to give you a very glossy, shifty topper, or I think they work really beautifully as inner corner highlights. And I'm gonna sooner highlight with this shade than the Skin Fetish shade in the top left that I don't really care for. So I really like these shades a lot. I think they add a lot to the palette. I don't like this one as much as I like the Astral White pigment, but it is very pretty. I very much like it. So now I would like to discuss my overall thoughts with you. So I am kind of, out of 10 eyeshadows, there are 3 in this particular palette that when I pick up this palette, I'm excited to use. And the 3 shades are the Blitz Emerald, VR Nectar, and the Astral Ghost Orchid pigment. So those are the 3 shades that I reach for the most. Now, when I think about my collection as it stands today, with all of my beautiful multi-chromes, now I have a lot from Clionadh Cosmetics. I have a very varied single eyeshadow collection. I was very intrigued by Cliona. I bought them. In the future, I would like to try other brands, multi-chromes, and see if I like their formula better, just test out the waters or whatever. But I do feel like I have, if not something that's an exact dupe for these 3 shades in my collection, I definitely know that I have something very close. And so what I would like to do with you at the end of this video, we are going to go through my singles collection and just dupe out a couple of the shades to prove to you that if those are the shades that you are buying these palettes, this particular palette for, then you don't need to buy this palette. I would recommend personally to buy dupes for the shades that you really want. So if you're looking for like a green purple multichrome shift, I would say find a single for it. I don't think Pat McGrath is the way to go. Now, you might want to keep in mind that a lot of the multi-chrome pigments that you get from indie brands are not, they're not really inexpensive, but wouldn't you rather pay $60 for those pigments and those multi-chromes and get exactly what you want? And then rather than paying $125 for an eyeshadow palette that you don't really love the whole color story. And that's kind of what it leads me to, is like, I really don't love this color story. I love shades in this color story, but I do not love this color story overall. In fact, you can kind of miss me with the 6 shades on the left. And that's not always the case with the Mothership palettes. That's just the case with this particular one. If this would be better for me if it was a quad and it was just those special shades. I think that would suit me better because I do like the bronze pigment. It's just like not something I often reach for. So if you're thinking about it, 3 out of 10 is what this palette would get from me. Not really based on performance. I think the mattes perform pretty well. I like the shimmer shades. They are what they are, and I just don't feel like they're special. I don't think they add anything to my collection at this point. So it's just kind of like, if they feel very repetitive, I have a black, I have a dark brown, I have shimmers, I have satins that look very similar to these. And you know what? I probably don't even use them in the other palettes that I have them in. Like, that's how uninspired I think they are. Beyond that, I wish there was a 3rd or 4th matte. Like, I wish there were 3 or 4 mattes in this particular palette. Because that you have a black and a very dark brown, it's kind of hard to build dimension. It's very hard to, go in soft. Whereas I think that Mothership 1, with the 3 mattes, they had like a light taupe, like a medium gray, a mid-tone gray, and then they also had a black. And I think with those 3, you could definitely build different kinds of looks. You can go very light, do a sheer wash of that light gray, and then put one of those very light, beautiful shimmers on top of it, and you have a very elegant, simple look. Where I don't think that anything about this palette is as elegant or as simple as Mothership 1 is. Say what you will about the cool tonedness of Mothership 1, it does provide you a more well-rounded eyeshadow experience, I personally would think. Whereas this one does not give you something as well-rounded as Mothership 1 does. I hope that makes sense. I actually would not, I'm not that I'm sad that I own this eyeshadow palette. I like it enough that I will use it and I love it. It's not something that I would declutter if it came to, but I also personally do not recommend this eyeshadow palette. Take a good hard look at it. Is that what you want? So down on the timeline below, at some point I'll be, looking at my collection, swatching out things to see what looks similar to the things in this palette. Jump to that part of the video if you're only interested in finding something close to the shades that are, I think, the most elevated part of this palette. All right, so what's gonna happen next is we're gonna jump to an eye tutorial using this so you can see me using some of the shadows in real time. Also, I think the look is pretty sick if I do see some of myself. So go ahead and check that out, and then also stay tuned for the swatching comparisons. I'm so excited though. I bought a new tripod for my desk so that I don't have to the rigmarole that I go through to record in this particular spot of my room is just unbearable to me. Take this brown shade. Sometimes I get very ahead of myself. I'm gonna prime my eyes with the MAC Paint Pot today. I'm gonna do a bit of a cut crease situation, I think, today. There's this eye shape that I've been really enjoying, so I'm gonna do that eye shape today. And it basically is just an oversized cut crease, kind of verging on drag painting, but I while I am making a new crease, it's not like, I'm not really raising my eyes. Like I'm not, do you know what I mean? Like it's not the same. Like I don't want to say that it's the same thing when it's not the same thing. Also, I do apologize for the quality of like sound in this portion of my video. It's just like too annoying to get my good mic over here. I have a system. Is it good? I don't think so. I'm gonna set that with the Laura Mercier translucent setting powder. I like to set my base. I've mentioned this many times on my channel. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this brown shade, which I will put the real name of up on the screen because I like don't keep those plastic covers. I just don't care. The shade names aren't important to me. I don't really think they're important in general. So because I don't have eyebrows, essentially what I do is like kind of follow the pathway, not like as high as my eyebrow, but like I go like right on top of it and slightly underneath it, and then I just kind of like wing it up on the side here. So I've already mentioned this, but I think this is like, you can see it in practice here, is that like there's not enough dimension. There's only two mattes and they are both very deep shades. And I don't think that I wish there was like something lighter here, but I bet if you have, I don't have deeper complexion, so I can't really speak to your experience with this palette, but it might be better. Like these two shades might be just better for someone who has a deeper complexion, as far as like those being the only two options for mattes, which is totally fine. And so you can kind of see like some people like cut the crease, and like I will cut the crease too a little bit, but I try to just like make it happen as I'm blending. Like I will need to cut the edges because I do want that sharpness of there being like nothing there, but I try to like create that shape before I have to cut it out, whereas some people will like blend all over that, and that's just not how I do it. Okay, and so then I'm gonna take the Extreme Black here. I think it's called Extreme Black. If not, I'll have the different name up on it. And then I'm gonna take a smaller blending brush. I'm gonna tell you what the brush is because why not? Because these brushes, this particular set of brushes I have are labeled. This is the Wayne Goss number 20. And so I'm really gonna try to like load some black on there and go a little bit lower and more purposeful right where I wanna cut the crease with this black, and trying not to take too much of it into the wing, just like a dull blend like up this far. I want to keep it mostly inward. I don't want it to like go all the way out here, because I think if it does go all the way out, it's just gonna like do some things I don't want it to. Then I'm gonna go back in with the brush that I put the brown shade and just blend those together. I'm trying to make sure that a catastrophe does not happen on this video like it did with my other tutorial. And then once I did that tutorial, I was like, I need to do more tutorials just so I'm like comfortable doing them. And then I'm gonna do the same thing with the black on the other eye. And I am like using more of like a patting motion to apply the black. And like, I'm not looking to, I don't wanna take it all the way to black. Like this blown out situation is like, I think more ideal for what I want to do with this. I'm adding some more black to the front of this, to like closer to the nose on this side, because I just feel like it did not reach the same depth. It's not shaped the same. So these all kind of like come to a point, the Wayne Goss ones. I think this is a BH, it's a BH number 5, but I think it's a number 5 in the particular kit that I have. And so what I'm going to do is take this golden, well, it's not really golden, but this shade right next to the highlight shade. Again, name will be on the screen, just not in front of me right now. And to kind of diffuse, like I'm just going right over top of the dark brown on my eye just to even more seamlessly blend. And I know that like obviously it's not a matte, but it is closer to my skin tone than anything else in this palette. And they're not like super shiny, so it's not gonna like do too much. It is gonna add some glow though, which I'm okay with. And it's like, I put my highlighter up there that far anyway. So just kind of a little bit of diffusing. Okay, and then I'm gonna take my paint pot again. You can do this with concealer if you for whatever reason wanted to replicate this look. I like in my head have decided that like, why would anyone want to replicate my looks? But I guess I shouldn't think like that because I have been asked, and I want to be cognizant and aware that people may want to do the looks that I'm doing. So I'm gonna take like, this is a brow brush. It's the Anastasia Dip Brow Pomade brush. I'm gonna use it to cut my crease. And so I'm gonna rest my eyes. I have a heavy brow bone, but two, my eyes are hooded. And so I want you to be able to see what I'm doing on the lid. So I'm just gonna go a little higher. If you have big eyes, you like, if you have a lot of lid space, you don't have to go as high up as I am. And I'm only gonna cut it, God, I hope I'm in frame when I'm doing stuff. I like really don't know. Cut it to about where it starts dipping down, because that's all I really want as far as where the cut crease will go. Because then I'm gonna blend the black and brown up to this corner, and then we'll have like a larger elongated cat eye. So I'm going to take the NYX glitter primer, and we're gonna start working with the special shades in this palette. Or like, the true pigments, I guess, is what they probably would really be. What Mother would really want us to call them. And for this, I'm actually gonna use the same brush that I just used. So this is the NYX glitter primer, in case you've never seen it. Don't wanna assume that everyone always knows what I'm talking about either. Or you could use any glitter primer. And so all I'm doing with this is I am getting close to where we cut the crease with the glitter glue, and then just kind of dragging it down. And I'm gonna take some with my finger and do the rest of my lid with the glitter primer. And since we are using the glitter glue, I'm gonna do one eye and then the other eye. Some people, that's how they do their eye looks. That ain't for me. And I would suggest not taking your glitter primer where you want to blend the mattes, because it gets a little sketchy. I'm gonna use a paddle brush. This one's from Morphe. I would like another one, but today's not that day. And so what I'm gonna do is gonna take the green, and I'm gonna focus it like mostly on the center of my lid. And we want it to get up to the black. And then that's about as far over either way as I want it to go. So I'm gonna come all the way down to my lash line. I'm trying to start blending this already because glitters and mattes, like, I find that part hard to blend. That's like one of my least favorite things, is to like do that kind of blending. I don't know, is that just me? Perhaps. And then I'm gonna find something similar, but not that same brush. This is a paddle brush from BH Cosmetics. And then I'm going to go into this shade in the top, right above the green and the white. And then I'm going to pat that on the inner part of my lid and just tappity tap, blend it into the green. You might have to go back into the gold a couple of times to start getting that blend between the two shades, because sometimes this can be a little bit just tricky to get like a gradient as opposed to just like, it's the green and now it is the other shade. And then you can kind of play with how far you want the green to come over. Like you can always dip back into the green, bring it closer to this inner part of the lid of the eyeball. And then I'm going to take like I don't know what they call this kind of brush. I think they call it a pencil brush. I don't think it's important to know shapes of brushes, especially since we work with such a visual medium. Something shaped like that. And then I'm gonna go into the like sparkly white shade and just in the inner corner, all the way up to the crease. Just take that as just like an inner corner highlight, but also just adding a little more je ne sais quoi to this look. Also, maybe for this shade, you might want to use like some Fix Plus to just make it a little bit more impactful. I'm not feeling like doing all that today. I'm gonna go do my other eye and then we will finish off the look. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the brown, matte brown, and we're gonna like kind of pat it up in this angle to like give us more of a cat eye. We probably will go into the black as well for more depth, but we're gonna start with the brown. And so, yeah, if you get glitter glue this far over, what typically happens is that the matte will stick to the glitter glue and just like kind of almost stop blending altogether. I'm going back in with, this is the original brush I used to apply the dark brown to the top part. I don't know, I know this like might be like a really weird way for some people to like construct an eye look, to like start with the top and then bring the eye into it, but I don't know, I've been very much enjoying that. And then I'm gonna use the same small brush I used on the top to add a little bit of black just down here and kind of just gently blend it up into the wing. We have some stuff happening. I'm gonna do the same thing to the other eye. Okay, I'm gonna do one more thing with you here. I am gonna add a little bit of glitter to where my cut is because I like doing that. I just need to pick a shade of glitter. I think I'm gonna use this one because it kind of has a little bit of all of the things. And so essentially what I'm going to do is I'm gonna lay down some eyelash glue right on the crease, like where I cut the crease. This is something new I've been doing. It's been working for me. I kind of like it. It's been a good way for me to like use my glitters more, which I love using glitter, but like it does oft feel like a chore to make the choice to use glitter. And then I'm just using a different angle brush, not the angle brush that I used earlier, and pick up some glitter and just press it on to that eyelash glue. This is the shade Life on Mars from Slayfire. And so as you can see, hopefully, that like I missed a little. Like there are some things that came outside of the line, as we might say. So what I like to do with that is take the other end of a spoolie brush and just gently flick away any of the glitter that is not where we want it. Then we still, you know what, I love this. This was the perfect glitter to use, I think. Gonna do the other eye. Bye. Okay, so we have the Mothership II. As I mentioned earlier in my video, I only like 3 of these shades. And what I'm going to try to prove to you and myself is that when Pat McGrath, potentially other brands, release something that we find very beautiful, but maybe we don't find the whole thing very beautiful, maybe it's possible that we can dupe out the shades that we are inspired by the most. So, my favorite shades in this palette are the Blitz Emerald, this Astral Pigment, and then this VR Pigment. I don't mind this brown shade, I really do kind of like it, but like this half of the palette I'm never gonna reach for. So, essentially what we're gonna do, we're gonna like swatch some things out. I'm gonna swatch some things out, I guess, and then if you really like this Blitz Emerald, but then I swatch something near it, something just like it that you also like, but you don't have this palette, but you were just interested in this shade, potentially that could be a better option for you to buy, because if you're gonna use and love and adore just this shade, it could be worth just buying a single. Or if we find some dupes in some of my palettes, that maybe you already have these palettes that I'm looking through, and you don't need this because you already have something just like the Blitz Astral Green, Blitz Emerald Green. So the first things first, I'm going to start, let's look for a dupe for Blitz Emerald. And it's gonna be the closest to my hand. Ooh, it is such a pretty shade. Okay, we're gonna just close that. I think the smartest place to start is going to be my Clionadh collection. So that's in this palette right here. And I will get the shades for you in post. These are very annoying, and I've already broken my Clionadh shades once. So I would like to be able to take the time to do that. So the thing is with Clionadh, these are stained glass. Some of these are multi-chromes. Some of them I might actually like just better than this altogether because I'm getting some extra, a little more from my big bang for my buck, a little more je ne sais quoi. So as I'm holding my wrist near it, these two right here seem to sing the closest to it. So I'm gonna swatch this shade next to it. All right, so this one definitely packs a little bit more of a sheen, a little more of a punch to it. And it also has a little bit more of a blue and less of a blackened base, but they are definitely both black bases. When I swatch these two, this shade is much more appealing to me than this Blitz Emerald Green, because this, just look at it. Hold on, hopefully my camera will focus. There's just more to it, I feel. But let me also swatch this one. Now I would say that is more, there's more yellow or something in it, a little bit more swampy, but definitely still very close, definitely still feels like something in the realm of what we are doing with Blitz Emerald. And then I'm just gonna swatch a couple more here. I'm gonna swatch this one up here. Again, this one also has more yellow, and this one's a multi-chrome. So you're getting a little bit more dimension with it. And then this one. Potentially, it's a little bit lighter, but in person, it gives me very similar vibes, where the texture and the pieciness of this is a lot closer together than the Pat McGrath. The Pat McGrath is more like there's a black base with a glitter on top, and this one is just a more consistent formula. I'm not saying that's better or worse, I'm just trying to point out the differences for you. So I think out of my Clionadh shades, that's gonna be as close as we get. But I would also like to take a look at some of my other palettes. So the first palette that I think we might find something that dupe Blitz Emerald in is probably my 28 pan Natasha Denona. So I'm gonna swatch this shade. Well, it doesn't have the same, definitely not as special. This is definitely just feels more just like a regular shimmer. And then I'm gonna do this one right here. Or is that the one I did already? We'll find out. No, that is certainly not the one we did. That one has more of a brown base, so not really even close. Okay, so nothing there. But another Natasha Denona palette I have is the Metropolis. But upon opening this, all of the greens in here are mattes, so nothing in there. I did pull out my Dark Edits palette from Busy Art. I don't think this is gonna be close, but it's not gonna have that special texture. It doesn't have like the shine and the pieciness of the Pat McGrath, but it's a very similar color. And you know, with toppers and stuff, you could also finesse that. So there is some layering you could definitely do. I don't play with this Antiquity palette nearly enough, but I know there's a shade Arsenic. It's definitely gonna be a little more grungy. But honestly, it's kind of like the very dark version of this. It is green. It isn't looking green in the camera shot that I have pulled up, but definitely too dark, definitely too grungy. However, I'm seeing here in my collection, and I've mentioned this on my channel before, that I love like this kind of grungy green shade, even though I almost never wear it on camera. So I also have this Tom Ford quad. Okay. So definitely something similar, but this definitely has more of a blue pull to it than the Pat McGrath Blitz Astral. Blitz Emerald. I keep saying Blitz Astral. Now this is a Pat McGrath palette, but I feel like worth swatching. So now that I see that, if this had a black base, it would be very similar to this, but there's really no base color to this. If there is, it's very sheer and not black like this one, not blackened. However, so let's take a look at my arm here. Even without this, I have so many options to do something that is very similar to this. Especially, I think this shade right here, I really like in comparison. Also, I like this shade quite a bit right here. Now, again, you might have had some of these shades in my collection, and again, with the Cleona, I will definitely be putting the shade names up there for you in case you were curious and wanted to buy just one of those Cleona shades. But again, this green doesn't add to my collection as I have so many other beautiful greens. And it's not that I don't want to reach for this, but I'm not apt to reach for this because of it in this palette with this color story. I just don't think to grab this. If I'm thinking of a single green, I'm gonna go to my single collection and look at all of these other things that I have in my collection that are just so beautiful that aren't this. And I'm sure if you have lots of multi-chromes, lots of beautiful shimmer shades in your collection that tint green, I think that you could easily dupe the Blitz Astral shade. If not on the nose, you could definitely, you know, dupe the vibe, as HLP would say. Okay, I'm gonna rinse this arm, and then we're gonna start looking for a dupe for the VR shade, okay? All right, now I wanna look for a dupe for VR. I can never remember the shade name. We are famously working on a visual medium. So I am going to swatch this one, again, closest to my wrist. Oh, the shade's so pretty. So that's what we're looking for. So the beauty in this, while on camera, it just kind of looks rather plain. It definitely has lots of dimension and pieciness to it. So again, I think my natural inclination is to look at my Cleona shades. Cleona. And so instead of working on the green side, I think we're gonna take a look on the peachy side. So my eye's drawn immediately to this shade. All right, so definitely a vibe, but definitely not the shade. However, this has some green in it and is almost more interesting. So definitely not exactly the same, certainly not a dupe, but definitely I'm feeling the vibe. Right? Like we're not far away. I'm also gonna swatch this one much closer. However, it does not have big as pieces as this shade, but again, we're very close to the vibe. Some layering can happen. This one just feels more like a true shimmer as opposed to this one, which has a little bit more to it, like to it. And I know this one's gonna be too pink, but I just really, no, it's gonna be too green. I just really wanted to see it. Okay, that's really pretty. Okay, that's really pretty. Honestly, like how pretty that shade is. Okay, sorry, we're getting off topic. I don't really see anything else in here. Nothing striking me as something that's gonna end up close. Again, I will get the Cleona names for you in post. In post, so no worries, you'll get to see them. Okay, so when I'm thinking of something like a shade like this, there's gotta be something else in my collection that's similar. So I'm gonna look at my Pat McGrath little guys, this Blitz one. I don't think that one's gonna be anything quite like it. I did pull this one out. This is from Chantecaille. I was thinking of this shade, but it's not gonna be anywhere near what we need it to be. Has like the same base, but definitely not the pieciness, not the specialness. Oh, so just like look at this versus all the other shades. That's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that the Chantecaille shadows are bad. However, I'm just saying it's a very different experience. So just going through my collection real quick, what I have out, where I thought we'd find something similar. I have these two Natasha Denona minis. Again, this wouldn't be like a perfect dupe, but this shade right here in the mini retro palette is pretty kick-ass. Okay, so again, there's like definitely something to it, but it's definitely not close to this. So this is from the Mothership Mega from last year. This is gonna have too much pink in it, but definitely has the texture of this. Very similar. Why do I always say similar? Very similar texture, but definitely too pink for what we are looking for. And I would probably it'd probably be best to have all of these open on my vanity, on my table, but my table's rather small. This is it. Like, it doesn't go much further out than what you can see. Ooh. Okay, that's not quite like Blitz Emerald. Sorry, I got distracted. I was like, that was kind of close to Blitz Emerald. But it's not really. It has too much of a brown base on it. But in case you wanted to see the shades swatched, it's very pretty. Okay, and I do just want to open this up really quick. From doing a run through of my collection, this VR shade is much more special than the Blitz Emerald, which the Blitz Emerald, it was what drew me to the palette in the first place, what made me, eventually buy said palette. However, even though this is really pretty, I see a lot of things that I swatched here that have the vibes of this, that make me feel similarly. This shade right here, which is one of the Cleona shades, is pretty close. It just isn't as consistent of a shimmer all the way through, and less impact. Still very beautiful. I really like this shade. When I was playing with this palette for the review, whenever I was seriously considering all of the shades and really taking a deep dive, this is the shade that I liked the most. Unfortunately, I don't want to keep a palette just for one shade, right? If that's what it breaks down to. Because I've already proven that this isn't as special. This Blitz Emerald shade is not as special. It's not as unique. I found other things that I think perform better or similar enough that this isn't something that I'm particularly in need of. However, really nothing in my collection sings to me quite like this shade here. Okay, I'm gonna wash my arm off again, and then we are gonna play to see if we can find something with this Astral Ghost pigment, something like it. Okay, so I have one more shade I would like to find something in my collection that's similar, and it's this Astral Ghost pigment. And so what's interesting about this is that it has no base. It is more of that sparkly top coat. It's gonna give you that oil slick look with just the hint of pink shimmer. It's so beautiful. Now, my first inclination is to go to my Cliona. I think these are called like their Cliona glitters. And so, again, I mentioned that I damaged my Cliona shades by dropping the palette that they were in. I know that these have more of a white base than this, but it does make them just a little bit prettier, in my opinion. So this one has definitely more of a green. But the other thing is, the way I have my lighting set up is that anything with a shift doesn't really pick up. I don't know why. I don't know how I've done that. Now look at that. That is much more impactful than that. So they're not really performing, I guess, the same thing, but I think you could definitely get a sheer enough application that you're gonna get something similar to that. But just like look at this versus that. This is something that I'm going to reach for a lot more than that. This one's so flaky and gorgeous. PC. Ooh. Now this shade has, so this one has less of a base than this one, so it's kind of closer, but you can almost not even really see the Blitz Astral, like this ghost pigment, versus all of these, which are definitely something more interesting. I don't even think I need to look in the rest of my collection for a dupe for this. I like all of these better, even though like this one's more purple. This one's pretty close as far as just like the hint of pink in it. But all of these are much more satisfying to me than this one. So unlike the VR shade, which was much harder to find a dupe for, I have already improved upon one of the shades in my collection. So I think what's going to happen is, being truthful to myself, is that I'm going to declutter this. I have some more work to do with the Pat McGrath palettes that I'm going to keep this around for, but this will not be in my collection forever. Well, you know, probably likely none of my makeup will be in my collection forever, but this is still in such good condition. Someone else who may be in my life who maybe can't afford a Pat McGrath palette and would like to try it, or you know, who just loves makeup might enjoy this a little bit more than me, and it might get a little bit more appreciated. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you are new here, I appreciate you so much for watching this video. I love that. We're all about gay rights here, and gay rights is thumbsing up this video. And I don't know that that is thumbing up. I don't know if it's like cul-de-sac or whatever, but whatever, thumbs up for a real one, thumbs up for homosexual. This is a very nuanced baguette, and if you want to hear more nuanced thoughts from this baguette, you'll hit the subscribe button. If you like this voice and would like to hear more of the golden, dulcet tones that I have to provide, I also appear on 3 separate podcasts, and those are all linked in the description box below, and I would love for you to go check one of those out. I'm a pretty good time, if I do say so myself. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will hope to see you in my next video. Bye, friends. What am I doing? I like literally forgot exactly how do I end a video? I don't know.